For audio description purposes, a large snail has appeared on the stage. Just in terms of access, the snail is speaking snailese. We know there are many languages here at the event. This may not be one that you're particularly familiar with. The snail has an amazing iridescent shell, which is very soft and padded. Oh, the snail wishes me to do something. I think I've just got to pull on this pink ribbon. Oh, I think I've over-pulled. So the snail and I are holding a pink ribbon, which I think is going to symbolise the opening of Unlimited, the Symposium. Oh, yeah. Fantastic. So we've got somebody holding the other line, the other bit. Do you want to hold that one? Fantastic. Oh, Dave. Okay. Sniggle now has possibly the smallest pair of scissors in the world to attempt to cut through the largest ribbon in the world. Yay! The symposium is now open. Let's thank Sniggle. So welcome, my name's Jo Verrant. I'm senior producer for Unlimited. I'm a 50-something white woman with slightly multicoloured but really grey hair, tending towards the plump side. Welcome to everybody. Welcome to everybody here in the Unicorn, both in this space and downstairs in our relaxed viewing area. Welcome to everybody online at this moment and also online in the future for people who are watching this as it's in the middle of the night in some countries, so they're screening it at other times. A special welcome to the people who can't be here today because their visas were refused. So why are we here? We're here, quite simply, to change the world. Well, we're here to change the arts and cultural sectors of the world. We're here to find solutions to the barriers that disabled people face daily as they work or aspire to work within the arts as artists, audiences, participants and arts workers. This event is based on our values: creativity, ambition, quite often slightly overstretching ambition, quality, equality and diversity. And that's diversity not just of people, but also of opinions. You won't agree with everything you see or hear. You might be challenged. You might disagree, and that's okay. Please be respectful of other people's rights to their opinions and be curious and questioning, absolutely. But please, no personal attacks here or online. We've got people here from about 40 different countries around the world and many more online. We won't all think the same or use the same language to describe ourselves or our experiences, and that's all okay. The main point of this event is about taking action. What we want people to do is change the way they do things. We know the way that things are done at the moment excludes people, and we don't want that to continue. So you should all have your pink notebooks if you're here, and notebooks are accessible to you. Yep, people are holding them up. Fantastic. If you're at home and don't have a pink notebook, that's okay. Any bit of paper will do, any computer will do, any tablet will do, anything. Just take some notes. Think about what you could do differently. Anyway, that's enough from me. Our next welcome is from David Heavey, CEO of Shape Arts, one of the delivery partners for Unlimited.
Thank you very much. I'm going to milk that applause and act like that's the end of my speech. So goodbye and thank you. No, I'm David Heavey. I'm the CEO and Artistic Director of Shape Arts. Half of you yesterday heard the long hour Marxist lecture I gave, so I'll spare the rest of you. We're about art, social change, and inclusion and removing barriers, and I'll be here all week. So collar me, I'll be the bloke in the suit, or one of the blokes in the suits. And for audio description, I'm about 5'10 and a half, used to be 5'11", but now I'm in 50s, I'm shrinking. I have what I used to call Irish hair, but someone said that actually it's not always thick hair. So I've got thick hair, grey hair, and I'm always in a suit. Thank you very much. Curtsy.
And our next welcome is from Cecilia Wee, who's head of arts development at Arts Admin, who's the other delivery partner for the programme Unlimited.
Thank you, Joe. So, as Joe said, I'm the head of artist development at Arts Admin, and we're the co-delivery partner for Unlimited. So, for audio description purposes, and I think this is something that we really like to encourage all of the speakers and panelists to do. I'm short, I've got an asymmetric bob haircut, I like bright colours and pattern fabrics. A sparkly belt, exactly, and I'm of Singaporean Chinese descent. So just a few words about Arts Admin. We're really, really thrilled to be continuing our partnership with Shape to deliver Unlimited, which we think is possibly the most innovative disability-led arts program in the world. Let's see if that's true or not. So this really. The programme really connects to Arts Admin's values of being sustainable, collaborative and bold. Bold, absolutely. Working to challenge non-disabled privilege and entrenched attitudes towards disability in order to build an accessible, inclusive arts ecology where every voice and perspective is heard and can thrive. So we're really excited about the projects that Unlimited supports, the way that it reflects the incredible ambition and achievement of hundreds of disabled artists whose creative voices are transforming and enriching the cultural landscape of the UK as well as beyond that. And I'm also here throughout the symposium as well as the festival, so I look forward to meeting you all and discussing more of these issues with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name's Isabella. I've been organising some of this, so thank you for being here. Just a little bit of housekeeping. So we've had a fire alarm this week, so if there is one, please calmly make your way out of the building. The ushers will assist with that. No smoking in the building, please. There is the front of house team that will be ushering people around. If you need any support, please either go to them or us with the Unlimited lanyards. Again, the ushers will help with any first aid. Hello. Photos are being taken, and obviously we're live streaming. So if you don't want to be photographed, that's only mainly happening in this space. So we've got the relaxed space downstairs. In terms of access, we've got a 22-page document, which you're happy to have a look at if you want to. It's online on our website. And we have approximately 30 access workers in the building, so if you need any support, please let us know. In terms of when we go into breakout sessions, there are teas and coffees in every room, so please help yourself. All right, I think that's everything. Thank you.
That's all the welcomes over, and we can finally begin. And I'm absolutely delighted to invite, I asked Darren Henley how to introduce him, and he just said, Darren. So we've got Darren from Arts Council England to open the event with our first presentation. Over to you.
Thank you and good morning. It's great to be here. For audio description purposes, I am a 45-year-old man with glasses. I have less hair than I used to, so much less hair that this year I had to buy a hat for the summer for the first time, and I probably need a trip to Weight Watchers before Christmas. It's always great to have one of these microphones on. I'm always a bit worried when I do a presentation with one of these microphones. A few months ago, I did a presentation, and the guy who was on before me did one of those presentations with lots and lots of numbers on a screen that were very, very small, and no one could really read them. I suddenly started doing my presentation after him, and I suddenly realized I was losing the room. There were sounds coming across the loudspeakers that weren't coming from me. And we all sort of realised about the same time, me and the audience, that basically, and I could see the guy at the back doing the sound, hitting all the buttons frantically, that the chap who'd been on before me had nipped off to the loo. And they just couldn't isolate his microphone. So in the end, we just decided we would sit there in awe and listen. He did wash his hands, and he'd given one of those presentations that was pretty boring, but he got a massive round of applause when he came back into the room and looked completely confused. So I know what a great theatre this is, and I know that that sort of problem doesn't happen here. But as I say, thank you very much for inviting me today. It is really a great honour to give the opening words at this symposium. I'm sure we'll all have an inspirational and provocative couple of days. For me, that's the essence of the work that Unlimited supports. We know that England's arts and culture sector is celebrated for its originality and the depth of its talent. But we also need to know that it needs to make fundamental changes in perception and practice to offer parity of opportunity to disabled and deaf artists. And that's the reason why we've supported Unlimited. We're proud of Unlimited and the work that it's championed. It's been a game changer since its role in 2012 Cultural Olympiad. And initial conversations between the London Olympic Committee and the Arts Council led to wider partnerships with other home nation arts councils and with the British Council, creating a commissioning pool of £2.2 million. And that's a significant enough sum to generate a body of high-profile, artist-led experimental work with lasting influence. This marked a real shift for us and an appetite to witness further changes, resulting in 2 further Unlimited programmes and Arts Council investment of more than £4 million. 10 years on from its founding, Unlimited has validated that decision to invest directly in the ideas and talent of disabled and deaf artists. It flourishes both through the Unlimited Development and Commissioning Programme and the South Bank Centre's biennial Unlimited Festival. The work it supports is consistently acclaimed, and that must be because of the variety and quality that emerges from this artist-centred approach. Unlimited has supported work that is political and polemical, lyrical, meditative and joyous, work characterised by a passionate interest in artistic possibility. It's built strong international and touring partnerships and has growing relationships with leading arts organisations, cultural venues, festivals and promoters. Its success can be attributed to a number of factors, from its commitment to collaborative working to the leadership of its senior producer, Joe Verrett, who I think deserves a big round of applause. But at the heart of Unlimited is the talent, vision and imagination of disabled and deaf artists who've reflected and challenged the world in which we live and moved us to laughter, anger, joy and action. And I want now also to particularly thank Shape Arts and Arts Admin for achieving such impact with Unlimited's commissioning programme. And we're grateful to our partners also at the South Bank, where the Unlimited Festival has become a platform to bring together artists, presenters and promoters from right around the world. And one of the notable successes of Unlimited has been its international impact. It's attracting delegates supported by our partnership with the British Council and through securing international bookings for disabled and deaf artists from England, whose work has now been seen in Europe, South America, Asia, North America and Australasia. This international success highlights some of the frustrations for disabled and deaf artists here in England, who can find themselves better received abroad than at home. And that's our continuing challenge, to shift our cultural paradigm and to remove the barriers that are so often a matter of power and perception, as well as being practical and financial. These barriers were detailed in the report Making the Shift, commissioned by the Arts Council from the diversity consultancy, the EW Group. This laid bare the experience of disabled and deaf artists, describing challenging working practices and environments, challenging recruitment processes, pay and conditions, and opportunities for career progression. We know from last year's diversity report that progress has been too slow, but there were signs of some promise. There was an improvement in success rates for disabled and deaf applicants to grants for the arts, and we're delighted to welcome a new generation of disability-led organisations into our national portfolio, with 11 organisations joining last year, including Disability Arts Online, Diverse City, Bamboozle and Together 2012, Venture Arts, the Power Orchestra and Friends, and Access All Areas. The additions to the portfolio owed much to the Elevate programme, which committed £5.3 million to develop the work of organisations outside the national portfolio, with the potential to come into the portfolio and to make a strong contribution to the creative case for diversity. And our Director of Diversity, Abid, will be talking some more about the Elevate programme tomorrow. Sustainable change requires change in the approach of leadership, and that's why our Changemakers programme has been so important. We invested £2.57 million in supporting 20 changemakers to take up senior roles across literature, visual arts, orchestras, theatres and museums to help organisations develop a more diverse mindset and leadership, and to understand how diversity makes strong business and creative sense. And I'm really delighted that Andrew Miller, one of the changemakers, he's also the UK Government Disability Champion for Arts and Culture, and also a member of our National Council, is chairing the Unlimited panel asking how disabled and deaf artists can change the so-called mainstream arts sector. We need to see disabled and deaf artists having the agency to choose what their work is and how it's framed. Some see themselves very much as disabled artists whose work is disability-focused. And some artists and makers see themselves as artists first and foremost. We recognise the social model of disability, but we acknowledge that artists choose to define themselves in a number of different ways. We've changed the way we capture data on disabled and deaf artists in response to sector feedback. And we're also engaged in conversations around how we can better support artists who define as neurodivergent. The Arts Council role must be to support artists, however they choose to present themselves. As you know, through the Creative Case for Diversity, we're encouraging funded organisations to make diversity a natural and fundamental part of all of their creative processes. There must be real change. We're ensuring that there are effective measures in place for accountability, and I want to emphasise that we will take action if a change is not forthcoming. There's also a need for the cultural sector to meet the access requirements of artists, and to go further to show and share their work and the unique insight that it offers to everybody. The Arts Council wants to do more. In our last investment round, we provided more support for the work of individual artists, alongside funds for developing creative practice. And we'd like to see more applications from individual disabled and deaf artists. We've worked hard to make the processes more transparent and accessible, but we can always do better, and for that we need your input. The Arts Council is committed to the development of an arts and cultural sector that is representative of modern society and in which there are no barriers to participation. As a nation, we need to use all the creative talent that we have. As a society, we must take steps to include everyone in our cultural conversation. And as individuals working in the arts, we must ask ourselves what we're doing to challenge preconceptions and prejudice and to ensure that the best of art is properly supported. It's a moral, civic, and cultural responsibility. The work of disabled and deaf artists is often the boldest, most aesthetically adventurous art out there. This symposium will yield plenty of interesting debates, but all of us want more. We're on a journey, and that requires the impetus of action. I hope that we'll go away from these couple of days inspired and ready to take practical, effective steps in the work we do day to day to bring about real change. Thank you for listening.
Fantastic. What a brilliant way to begin, to really start to frame our thinking from Arts Council England, who are our biggest financial supporters. So, let me tell you how each panel is going to work. So each session begins with a set of diverse opinions and provocations from our speakers, and then that will roll into a stimulating panel discussion chaired by our chairs. Then we're going to break into discussion groups. Because for us, the most important people in the room aren't the ones who are on stage. They're the ones who are in all our different audiences. Every opinion is vital, and every opinion is valued. So we're breaking into 4 groups. There are 4 groups happening within the Unicorn, in this space, in the Claw Theatre, in a room called the Foil Room, and in a room called the JLR Room. Each of those different spaces has different access options, and are of different sizes, because we know some people might prefer a smaller group, and some people prefer a larger group. There are also discussion groups happening in the UK in different venues and also around the world. Some of them live and some of them will be using the recorded feed simply because the timings don't work. And oddly, people didn't want to have a discussion at 4 a.m. So there aren't experts here and a passive audience there. That's not how this event works. So this is about you and your responses, which can be in any form. We even have a video room, so if interpretive dance is your thing, and that's how you want to respond, we can record you doing that, and then actually we can put that out too. So words, drawings, videos, links, memes, whatever. This is a conversation. So, if discussions aren't your thing, there are also some artistic interventions around the space and also online. So again, ask at reception, go and seek them out. They may come and find you if you don't come and find them. So don't sit back and listen. This is about action. What are you going to do as a result of being here? What are you going to do as a result of tuning in? So do tweet, Instagram, Facebook, whatever your platforms are. Any opinions, any thoughts, and use the hashtag Unlimited Symposium. It's a shortened version of the word unlimited, UNLTD Symposium. Are we ready to begin? Excellent. Then I'd like to welcome the panelists for our first session. So just give us a few minutes, we'll set them up, but why not talk to the people around you and get to know some new faces while we do that. Thank you. Okay. Okay, welcome back. I've been asked to give out the Wi-Fi password if people missed it downstairs. It's the Unicorn Public Wi-Fi here, and the password is capital U Unicorn, capital P Public, capital W Wi-Fi 18. Okay? Now, as the host for this session, I'm going... Repetition. Okay, I'll do it again. It's always good having access people on a panel as well, because I can't hear you. Excellent. Capital U Unicorn, capital P Public, capital W Wi-Fi 18. Yep. Okay. As host for this session, all I'm going to do is read out the topic and introduce your chair, and he's going to do the rest. So, art. How can disabled artists change the so-called mainstream art sector? Can they change it from within, or does it end up changing us and our work?
Squiggle.
Are disabled artists supported to make art of quality and ambition and artistic innovation within the mainstream,
Sausage.
or only in specialist disability-specific settings?
Sausage.
Is the UK's creative case for diversity working?
Working.
And your chair is Andrew Miller, who I was going to read out a big biog. We've decided not to. It's online, but I've known Andrew for a number of years, and I'm always incredibly impressed by his
Hair.
ability to really, among many other things, I was going to say, his ability to chair panels. So it's with utter delight that I hand over to Andrew.
Thanks very much, Joe. Good morning, everyone. I'm Andrew, and for audio description, I'm white, male in his early 50s, and I'm wearing a black jacket, a black shirt with a matching black wheelchair. So I like black. We have a very distinguished lineup for you today, who will be sharing their
Katy Perry.
differing perspectives of working both in mainstream arts and disability-led arts. We're joined by internationally acclaimed artist and campaigner Jess Tom, everyone's favourite Tourette's hero, Finnish campaigners Sari Solovara and Oti Solanati from Helsinki's Culture for All, representing the visual arts, Mark Steen, director of Outside In, and composer Lloyd Coleman, associate music director of the Para Orchestra and Friends. The format is simple. Each of us will speak for a maximum of 10 minutes, which I will monitor and interrupt if that limit is exceeded. We'll then have a short Q&A on stage between us, which will take us to around midday. And if there's time for questions from the floor, there's going to be a roving mic. Following a comfort break, we reconvene in smaller groups at 12:15 for you to ask questions, challenge us, contribute your thoughts to this debate. I'll outline which of us will be in each room at the end of the session. Regrettably, I'm not an artist, so I'm going to kick us off with some policy and strategic observations by way of introducing you to my mission as the UK government's Disability Champion for Arts and Culture. And I'll wake you up at the end. I'll start with a very bold statement. I believe there has never been a better time to be disabled and in the arts. The UK's disability-led sector and our disabled artists lead the world in the quality and invention of their work. Ever improving access and a shift towards inclusive practice in mainstream arts offers better opportunities for disabled audiences, artists, and employees alike. Moreover, we are seeing disabled artists disturbing mainstream culture and influencing art forms in ever more creative ways. Take the exciting work taking place in classical music, being delivered in the southwest of England, which Lloyd will tell us about more later, or the mainstreaming of disabled theatre talent, from Ramps on the Moon winning UK Theatre's Best Touring Award in 2017 to Jess's radical work on stage and on BBC Two. But it's not all good news, and the creation of my role indicates much more needs to be done. There are 13 million disabled people in the UK, 20% of our national workforce, with a combined spending power of £250 billion, the purple pound. Whilst the business case for inclusion is overwhelming, mainstream arts and cultural organizations have been slow to recognize it, preferring in the past a patricianly approach of beneficent outreach rather than meaningful engagement with disabled people as employees, performers, and audiences. And that's where I come in. The government realizes it needs assistance to help tackle the issues disabled people face across a range of industries, from retail to airports. And they've recruited 11 experienced industry champions, all working in different sectors and undertaking this role voluntarily. We don't work for or represent the government. We're simply there to create a platform for change, offering our sectors another conduit to wider government and disability agendas. So whilst I will publicly promote progress and good practice from within arts and culture to government and the media, I will also use this role to challenge the mainstream sector to raise its game. And that's a critical distinction. My focus is the mainstream, that's the world that I've come from, and that's where I really want to see the change. And I see this role as a catalyst for change. My delivery partners are the 4 national arts councils, British Film Institute, and sector umbrella bodies. Arts Council England have already committed to working with me in their current 4-year corporate plan, and the Arts Council of Wales are currently placing diversity for the very first time at the centre of their own corporate plan. My role is UK-wide, and travelling around the country from Belfast to Edinburgh, Cardiff to London, I've learned that the key issues facing the arts and disabled people are common to all 4 nations, and there is excellent practice being delivered in each territory, practice that needs to be more widely shared. Part of my role is to do just that, but my focus is on 3 areas where change is urgently required: training and representation, employment and governance, and audience experience. And I'll take you through the challenges of each. I want disabled artists and creators to have better access to training. Theatres in England, such as Royal and Derngate and Hull Truck, have committed themselves to ambitious quotas of diverse staff and performers, proving there is industry demand for disabled talent. These theatres understand the need to reflect their own audiences. Yet, most successful disabled performers have emerged from non-traditional routes. Across UK drama schools in 2016, there was not a single graduate who self-declared a disability. So there's clearly an issue with the talent pipeline. I will work with apprenticeship providers such as Creative Cultural Skills and specialist HE institutions such as art schools and performing arts colleges. I'm going to tackle the dismal disability workforce statistics. The chair of Arts Council England, Nicholas Sirota, has characterised these stats as a failure by English MPOs. We have to do better than the current 4% of the English arts workforce declaring a disability, 2% in Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. By contrast, the equivalent in the much larger education sector is 12%. So I want to see arts employers promoting a positive culture, embracing the government's disability confidence scheme, leading employees to feel more comfortable and secure self-declaring disabilities. I also want to see disabled leaders at the helm of mainstream arts organisations, where currently there are none, together with better representation of disabled people on arts boards. That lack of disabled leadership in the mainstream I find disturbing, as there are no disabled gallery, theatre, or concert hall managers in this country. Why not? I believe our total invisibility at this level is linked to disabled people not being perceived within a wider diversity context by both conservative arts boards and management. A whole generation of arts administrators wrote off the creative potential of disabled people. They talk the talk of diversity, but actually were content to do very little. Mostly retired now, their legacy is maintained by a small select group of industry headhunters who recruit most senior positions in the arts and whose record on disability and wider diversity is lamentable. Quite what the role of commercial and expensive headhunters is in such a subsidized industry as the arts beats me, but they are nothing if not consistent, producing a steady stream of white, middle class, usually male, non-disabled leaders. And until very recently, they were assisted by leadership programs such as CLOR, whose dreadful record on disability I exposed some years ago and prompted a rapid and very welcome change of direction. I will challenge that system to prove that it's fit for purpose in a more inclusive age. Access also remains a problem in mainstream arts premises, a third of which, I estimate, are currently inaccessible to the disabled workforce. So I'm putting pressure on the arts councils to look at their capital spend plans in the future to influence and change access to premises. I also want to offer a voice for disabled audiences, advocating that we get to share artistic experiences in the same way everyone else enjoys. In 2018, it strikes me as astonishing that most UK venues do not offer disabled customers the ability to book tickets online, relying instead on access phone lines. So building on the pioneering work of Arts Council of Wales and the HINT scheme, which has supported 11,000 disabled people in Wales to attend activity across 40 venues through an access card, I'm proposing a single UK-wide access card that I think can transform engagement of disabled people in the arts in this country. I will build on Arts Council Northern Ireland's Disability Arts Standard to establish a charter that outlines minimum service expectations in return for public subsidy, but also captures best practice across a wide range of disabilities and activity, from training to employment and from access to governance. Essentially, this is all about making disabled people being welcomed and valued as audiences, as performers, and as employees. These priorities are shaped by my own experience of the mainstream creative industries over 30 years, which has offered me as a disabled individual few support mechanisms, frequent discrimination, and perhaps crucially, no role models to follow. My television presenting career was brought to a premature halt in the early 90s after an audition at the BBC, where I was told the Blue Peter audience is not yet ready for a disabled presenter. Much later on, I was shortlisted to become chief executive of Oxford Playhouse, a recruitment process from which I had to withdraw as the building did not possess a single accessible space in which I could be interviewed. 20 years apart, these experiences conveyed to me the same message. And ladies and gentlemen, I think we need to ensure this kind of basic discriminatory stuff doesn't affect another generation of disabled people. I believe we're in the midst of an exciting moment of cultural change in the arts and in wider society, a moment that has been created by disabled artists pushing creative boundaries. For me, there are just 3 words that represent that change. Britain's Got Talent. With audiences of 11 million, it could be argued that one programme has done more to alter perceptions of disabled people in this country than anything since the 2012 Paralympics. And the success of those 2 exceptionally talented disabled comedians, Lost Voice Sky and Robert White, coming first and second on Britain's biggest TV talent show. I've always believed that the UK arts sector has a duty to lead the development of disabled talent as a result of our significant public subsidy. But it appears we have a lot to learn from commercial behemoths like Simon Cowell and ITV. They have raised the stakes. And that's precisely what is now required from us in the arts. We have to lead the mainstream beyond the requirements of the Equality Act, beyond reasonable adjustments behind which they have hidden for too long. I would urge you all to offer leadership in your own organizations, in whatever sector you belong, to ensure poor training, rubbish access, and enduring discrimination in the mainstream arts are finally banished to the past. Only by being visible and vocal will we stop having to adapt for them. It's their turn to adapt for us, and they will be richer for it. Thank you very much. Now that I've got that off my chest, it's biscuit time. One of the great privileges for me of being one of the Arts Council changemakers last year was getting to meet and work alongside Jess Tom. Jess' work as an artist and as a campaigner has traversed disability arts and the mainstream. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jess Tom.
Biscuit, hat, a sausage. Don't headbutt the mic. I mean, that might happen. Biscuit, hello, Biscuit, I'm Jess. Biscuit, I'm a writer, an artist, and I make work across performance, participatory, and visual work. Biscuit, cats. I also have Tourette syndrome, biscuit, a neurological condition which means I make movements and noises I can't control, called tics. Biscuit, called Sebastian. They're definitely not called Sebastian. Fuck, biscuit. Biscuit, fuck it. Hedgehog, biscuit. Having Tourette's makes me neurologically incapable of staying on script. So a lot of what I'm about to say will be a surprise to everyone. Fuck it, including me. Beans! Biscuit, I heckle myself too. Fuck it. Biscuit. Biscuit. There are 3 things you need to know straight away. Biscuit. Firstly, you're going to hear the word biscuit and hedgehog a lot in the next 10 minutes. Fuck it. Secondly, if I say something funny, you're absolutely allowed to laugh. Biscuit. And finally, several times a day, biscuit, my tics intensify and I completely lose control of my body and speech. Biscuit. If this happens while I'm speaking, fuck it. Biscuit. Donkey Kong will erupt out of my vagina. Okay. My God. That won't happen. I hope, but Andrew will take over. Biscuit. Very rarely do I feel a bit embarrassed, but biscuit. I'm going to describe myself briefly for anyone who might find this useful. Biscuit. I'm a 30-something white woman of average build, biscuit, with curly brown hair and a very cool wheelchair. Beans! All the slides I'll be showing, with the exception of one photo, biscuit, which I'll describe in more detail when I get to it, biscuit, are cards giving the title of each section, and I'll read these out in turn too. Biscuit, I'm really excited to be part of this panel today, biscuit, because I'm passionate, biscuit, about creating opportunities for difference, biscuit, to be visible and audible, biscuit, in cultural institutions. Biscuit. Biscuit. It was seeing disabled artists like Liz Carr and Matt Fraser in high-profile spaces that gave me the confidence to start Tourette's Hero and feel like being an artist, biscuit, was a possibility for me. Biscuit. Before I share the ideas that I feel are relevant when discussing disability, art, and the mainstream, a few caveats. First, I understand myself as a disabled person using the social model of disability. This means I'm not disabled by my wiggly body, biscuit, or my tics, but my non-accessible environments, systems, and attitudes. Biscuit. Biscuit. Next, I'm going to talk about my experiences with mid and large-scale venues. Biscuit, but this in no way means that I value them more than smaller spaces or our relationships with partners outside of the arts sector. Biscuit. Finally, biscuit, being in big established spaces isn't an inherent marker of success. Biscuit, but it can be useful, biscuit, in biscuit, reaching more people and levering resources and ensuring that people, particularly children and young people, biscuit, see themselves and their experiences represented and valued. Biscuit. I'd now like to very quickly share 3 key ideas that have emerged from my experiences working across art forms over the last 2 decades. And hopefully some of these will be useful in your work nurturing creative disabled talent. Beans! First up, the politics of place. Over the last few years, I've been very fortunate to travel across the UK and internationally. Biscuit. I've had a chance to meet disabled people from across the country and across the world. And it's been fascinating to see how conversations about access and rights are shaped by local context. Biscuit. I've come to understand how fundamentally linked our expectations are to the politics of where we live. Biscuit. Both in the UK and internationally, I've seen how hard it can be for disabled artists to connect with each other, with venues, and with audiences. Biscuit. This might be because of geographical, economic, or attitudinal barriers. As an international community of creative thinkers, we have to find ways to address these challenges, dismantle the barriers, and connect people across borders. Biscuit. Next up, make the right adjustments. Permission to adjust my surroundings, Biscuit, to meet my needs is both essential and transformative. At the end of last year, Tourette's Hero collaborated with the Barbican Centre in London on Brewing in the Basement, an intergenerational celebration of disability culture for disabled and non-disabled people. Here is a photo from the event. A young boy in a green jumper has outstretched arms, looks up to the sky as colourful confetti falls around him. He is surrounded by lots of people of different ages, ethnicities, and genders. Confetti is flying everywhere. Fuck it! Over 250 people worked with 5 artists and companies to shake up the Barbican's pit space and surrounding spaces. Biscuit, we set them a simple task. Get involved with the artists and help mix things up at the Barbican. Biscuit, this event culminated with all the creativity we'd been brewing downstairs, Biscuit, erupting into the main foyers and spaces. To create truly inclusive environments, we have to be ready to adapt. Biscuit, whether that's the physical environment, the sensory landscape, the way we communicate, or the rules. But we need to make the right adjustments. At a time when many people and organisations are under intense and sustained pressure, it's all too easy to adjust to what is happening, rather than make the necessary adjustments to our systems and structures to meet our individual and communal requirements. As a society, we must ensure we're not adjusting to inequality, but making, Biscuit, the adjustments needed to equalise opportunity. Biscuit. Ethos, quality, and critique. Biscuit. It's essential that disabled artists continue to challenge each other to make ambitious, high-quality work, and that venues invest in the development of disabled artists rather than just programming finished work. Biscuit. It also feels crucial to me that venues and artists think about how work is made as well as the final piece or product. It can't just be good enough to have a disabled person on stage. There has to be a clear creative rationale for the work, and disabled people need to be leading on decision making. It's also essential that venues get used to looking at a wide variety of disabled-led work. They need to nurture disabled critics, writers, and artists, and understand that work shouldn't have to fit into a narrow ideal or always be educative of non-disabled people. Biscuit. Venues need to remember that disabled people are their audience too. Biscuit. And they need to be wary about how assumptions and stereotypical beliefs might influence their programming decisions. Our most recent production, a neurodiverse presentation of Samuel Beckett's play Not I, Biscuit, aims to tackle what we perceived as a cultural curation that was happening around what work was and wasn't being made accessible. It's a co-production with Battersea Arts Centre, who joined us in taking a risk and tackling a piece outside of both of our comfort zones. Biscuit. Mainstream venues need to back disabled artists with resources, space, and support. With this combination, incredible developments in disability arts are possible. So in conclusion, Biscuit, in a time of increasing division, Biscuit, it's more important than ever, Biscuit, that mainstream venues use their power to promote different perspectives. This can't just be white artists with physical impairments, but needs to include artists of colour, learning disabled artists, and those with lived experience of mental distress. When we're thinking about the barriers we want to bring down, Biscuit, it's worth thinking about what we want to develop, nurture, and protect at the same time. Biscuit, as a creative community of disabled artists, we must give and receive solidarity. Biscuit, and this doesn't always mean agreeing with each other. We have a shared responsibility to create opportunities for difference to be visible, for people to feel safe, Biscuit, and for creative communities to lead the way in sustainable social change. Thank you. Fuck it. Biscuit. Hello, Biscuit. 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 And also, I love cats. Fuck.
Thank you very much, Jess.
Sausage. Fuck.
Mark Steen has championed outsider art throughout his professional career, which has led to his creation of Outside In, an organisation which promotes artists excluded from the art world, whether due to disability, health, social circumstances, or isolation. Please welcome Mark Steen.
Thank you. I think it's a very hard act to follow after Jess, so I'll do my best to, compete. So, I'm Mark Steen. I'm in my late 50s. I'm wearing a grey 3-piece suit. I'm sort of mixed race, half Italian. Probably speak too fast. I've got grey hair, and if you see me afterwards, please feel free to speak. So should we start with my first slide, if that's all right? Oops, back one. It's not there. There we go. Okay.
Shit.
So, shit art, question mark, and then Mark Steen, director of Outside In. My provocation is a short exploration of artwork that sits on the margins and challenges our understanding of what art is, who is an artist, and why it is made. Shit art, ugly art, childish and unsophisticated. These are some of the terms I've heard in over 30 years of working with artists producing work outside of the mainstream, when talking with curators and arts professionals. Sometimes the prejudice is unspoken, hidden in excuses, but there nonetheless. Are they right?
Cats, sometimes.
Sorry. Point up that way. So, 4 drawings on toilet paper.
Toilet paper.
These drawings on toilet paper were made by a man in a secure unit at Netherton Hospital, are the first works acquired for the Adamson collection, now housed at Wellcome. They were drawn with the only materials the patient had at hand, toilet paper and the char from burnt matches. They're a moving testimony of creativity in the hardest of circumstances. They're enigmatic and mysterious. Part of their charge and interest is that they're made of such limited materials, but also the curious motifs that seemingly tell a story. Art produced in a conventional artist studio would never look like this. A quote by Jean de Buffet and a drawing of a man. Art does not lie down on the bed that is made for it. It runs away as soon as one says its name. It loves to be incognito. Its best moments are when it forgets what it is called.
Sausage.
I think the quote is fantastic. It perfectly captures the need to find a purpose for making art that is intrinsic and true to the individual. Many of the artists I most admire create work for purely personal reasons, often with no regard to audiences, or the need for acceptance or validation. They sidestep commodification or the need to sell their work. Their processes, materials, and subjects often arise from a need to make art despite the situations they find themselves in. They can make art to heal, to help them understand the world, express an inner obsession, or work spontaneously. I believe there is no such thing as good or bad art, just personal taste. We are swayed by the establishment and fashion of our time. We often follow the herd and do not trust our own vision and aesthetic. Removing the blinkers and looking at work from the outside reveals an exciting and dynamic body of artists and work, often overlooked and then forgotten. A photograph of a cell decorated with paintings and a drawing on paper. It is important to understand the context and purposes in which and for which non-traditional and outsider art is made. Often not commercial or seeking of audiences. Art made in asylums, on the street, at home, in prisons, gardens or day centres, but mostly not in studios. Often made outside of a supportive and structured environment by artists that on the whole are self-taught, using techniques, materials and skills they've developed themselves. I'm just going to show a few slides of artists and artworks that I admire and like. The Cell is by Julius Klingbeil. It's at the asylum in Göttingen in Germany. A patient in a secure unit who decorated his cell from 1951 to 1961. Julius never received any visitors. As survivor of the Nazi regime, he was forcibly sterilized and was supported in decorating his cell by staff at the hospital. An anonymous artwork from a recently discovered collection of patient artwork. We do not know the name of the artist, only that she was a woman receiving art therapy. The work only came to light recently, fortunately looked after by the son of a psychiatrist. Its sad state shows the journey it's been on, and possibly its lack of perceived value. Two photographs, one of a street painting and one of someone's workstation.
Hello.
Street art by the Sicilian Giovanni Bosco from Castellamare del Golfo. A disabled artist living in a small and confined space took his work to the streets of his local town, where it's now part of a local tourist offer. A workstation of an artist called Chaz Waldron, who I've known for many years, who lives in his flat and does his work by his double bed, which he rarely leaves due to his mental health. He produces work about his love for Jesus, his wife, and their dog. I particularly love this photograph on the screen now. It's a photograph of someone's bedroom ceiling and a photograph of Judith Scott. The ceiling is by a learned disabled artist called Gary Williams, who over many years decorated his bedroom ceiling on a repeated cycle. He must have laid in bed one night and saw the space and was inspired. The only record is of his father, who photographed each installation. And I met Gary in a day centre one day, and he showed me these photographs. And I was very inspired and impressed. But in the day centre, he was just given colouring in books to do, and no one took regard of what he was doing at home. And Judith Scott, probably the most well-known and successful learned disabled artist, her bound sculptures are mysterious and their purpose unknown. Two slides, two images, one of the Palais Ideal, a building in France, and second of an artist sitting on his rock environment. The Palais Ideal, made by Ferdinand Cheval, a French postman, he was inspired to make his palace after stumbling over a rock on his 26-mile round to deliver letters. It took over 30 years for him to create. And Rory McCormack, a living artist in Brighton, his structures made from pebbles he finds on the beach, inspired from different civilizations, and often under the threat of destruction by the local council. Sorry, where am I going? I'm doing fine. Sorry, I'm just getting worried. Okay. The problem with labels. I'm sure if you've been involved in the visual arts, you probably know there's a whole history of labels to describe artists and art, and there's I think an issue with artists who don't fit the system. And if you sort of think about it and do a sort of rough search, you might come up with an even longer list of terms. I think it's a confusing and contrasting list. Most of these are negative and lesser terms. I'm going to read through the list. Accidental art, art brut, disability art, folk art, marginalized art, maverick art, naive art, outsider art, patient art, primitive art, psychotic art, secret art, self-taught art, and visionary art. They're often, as I said, lesser, and not, you might assume that somebody who's self-taught is not taught, and being primitive means they're not sophisticated. What is clear, there's a lack of a collective identity for artists and individuals who don't fit the system. Outsider art is not an art movement or category that equates to others, such as expressionism and impressionism. It is a collectivizing of difference and a very troubling term. The only commonality is the artist's life's narrative and not their work. We need to find a new way of describing art in a broader setting, working with individuals, and not an arbitrary 19th century system of art labels. A historic little note to myself. A slide of a painting by Edwin Landseer of a dog and a coffin, and an image by Richard Dadd of fairies. Artists such as the British Richard Dadd, a successful artist who murdered his father in a psychotic episode and spent the rest of his life in the care of the Bethlehem Hospital. His work is seen as curious and eccentric when compared to the artists of the period. Landseer was the preeminent artist of the time, lauded and celebrated, but now considered mawkish and sentimental, the Damien Hirst of Victorian art. Looking at Dad's work now, we see its value and unique qualities in a very different way, with far more relevance and interest than that of Landseer's, I would argue.
Hello.
There must be innumerable others who created and died undiscovered, their work in the many landfill sites or destroyed in their death. We have an important role to widen our definitions as to what art is and who is an artist, if we are not to lose the work being made by artists on the margins of our society. This is an important and valuable part of our shared cultural history and should be there for future generations to see and enjoy. So my last slide, an image by Albert Loudon of Two People and Catch-22. Albert Loudon, The Outsider Art Dilemma. Albert Loudon's engagement with the art world has become a kind of historic touchstone for what happens to artists who seek to make the transfer to the mainstream. In 1985, he exhibited his work at London's Serpentine Gallery and sold every piece in the show. But this success was not met well, and Albert was considered to have lost his outsiderness by some arts professionals. Does commodifying this type of work mean that it loses its uniqueness and value? How can an artist succeed if the only way to gain recognition is to not seek it? My conclusion, I'd argue that rather than shit art, that this art from the margins is some of the most interesting and challenging work we can engage with. If you remove the blinkers of convention and approach it with an open heart and eyes, it will strike you with its integrity and emotional charge, leaving a lasting impression of the artist's feelings, thoughts, and obsessions, powerfully conveyed. It communicates in its own terms without apology or explanation. Artists shouldn't have to change to fit the system. The challenge is to find a way for the art world to adapt to include a wide body of artists and art and become truly inclusive, rethinking its values around curation, commodity, and terminology.
Love cats.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And now for an international perspective. Is that over? We're delighted to welcome from Finland, Sari Solovara and Outi Solalahti, who are campaigners. And we're very used to having widespread equalities legislation, which is also shared in Europe. But many disabled artists struggle to have their voices heard in other places. So please welcome Sari and Outi.
Really good to be. Have I messed the microphone up? This is better, I guess. So yeah, my name is Sari, and should I describe myself? I'm middle-aged, bit gray-haired, very white. I see that we're all white panel to my eyes, and I'm a sort of like an anti-type, I guess, but I'm very passionate for justice anyway. So yeah, how are you going to cope with describing yourself?
Yeah, my name is Outi, and I'm also white, woman in my 30s. I have quite long light brown hair, which is shaved on the right side of my head. And of my outfit, I would like to say that I'm wearing a white t-shirt, which represents an artwork by a Finnish disabled artist called Matti Rauhaniemi. And it says, it's an aphorism, and I guess it's something like this in English: be yourself, be a monster, be an optimist. So.
Yeah, I forgot to say that I use a cane for walking. I left my assistant dog home, and I'm very stiff, bent over, whatever. And we work for the Cultural Service in Finland. It's nationwide. We are all for the equality, the inclusion, the access, diversity in the culture field. We work together with different parties in the field. We mediate a lot. We have existed for some while, and we have the main cultural associations behind this service. So we are recognized in a sense, and we do very diverse. We look from the perspectives of different minorities at our work. And yes, we definitely want to thank this team that is organizing this event. Thanks for letting us be here, and it's exciting to be able to exchange with all of you. So good to be here. And we also need to thank the Taike, which is the Arts Promotion Center of Finland, that made our journey possible. Yeah?
Yeah. And in the next few minutes, we will talk about artists being outside or inside, and what is the meaning of it and why it matters. And on the slide, we have our headline, Outside or In, and why it matters. And there's also the logo of Culture for All, which has our website in 3 languages, Finnish, Swedish, and English. And in English, it's cultureforall.fi. And this presentation is based on our cooperation and discussion with disabled artists during the years, and also my master's thesis that I'm working on right now. So it's about the positionality of disabled and deaf artists in Finland, within the Finnish art and culture field.
The next slide. Yeah. Well, we're going to start with a bit of a success story. There's a picture here, a black and white picture by Pekka Elomaa. It shows 4 men in an urban setting, casual clothing, 2 of them wearing beanies on their heads. They pretty much seem to be just minding their own business, but the guy in front is making a face and a hand sign of the horns, or the devil horns, the rock horns. He's looking directly into the camera, so in our eyes.
And this picture shows a punk rock band called Pertti Kurikan Nimipäivät, which is sometimes shortened as PKN. And they represented Finland in the Eurovision Song Contest in 2015. And, well, their music genre is not mainstream, and the musicians are learning disabled. But yet they broke into the mainstream and used the media attention to do disability politics. So they, for example, helped gather in over 72,000 names to a citizens' initiative to stop the competitive tendering of the housing services of disabled people. And also 2 award-winning documentary films are made of their lives and careers, and they're called The Punk Syndrome and Punk Voyage. And the band, in our opinion, has made a huge impact. Before they break out, the learning disabled people were not interviewed in live TV shows, but now people wanted to hear what they had to say. And the musicians also raised a lot of discussion on disability politics. But did PKN change the mainstream sector? Well, they certainly were able to shake and break some norms, like who can be a respected musician, and who do we want to represent our nation in an international competition, and who can have a say into politics and how the society should take its people into account.
Next slide.
Yep.
Yeah, this is like people before us have been talking also about maybe the quality of the art, and if we talk about mainstream and the marginalized people making art, there's always this question, like if there are options or limits. If you come from outside of the norm, are you going to be like automatically marginalized, or could there be options for doing something maybe very good or interesting? And as we all know, it seems to be here, and it is here in our country, Finland, that the art world is full of conventions and narrow thinking, even if you don't want to, if you're part of it, you don't want to see it maybe, but that's how it is, and we need to all the time see where the barriers are, who it is that uses the power, who defines quality, who is saying like who can be an artist and recognized as such. We wanted to mention one artistic director from a theater in Stockholm. Teater de Ville is the theater, and the man is Johan Bössman. He's studied this, they have a history of making integrated theater, And at some point he was very new to this whole setting and got interested in it and has done his thesis about this subject. And he found that differences in functional ability can increase the artistic quality. Like he suggests that being forced to look for new ways of expression can create some unconventional yet interesting excellence. Maybe.
Does it work? So, although we are focusing on art in this session, it's not just about art. All the structures of the society can either enable or disable. And, well, if you're struggling for inclusion in all aspects of life, how could you operate in the mainstream of arts? And this is something that I also found in my research that, well, we really need, equality must be ensured by legislation, and it comes down to accessibility, assistance, transport, interpretation, and all kinds of things. Yes. And to conclude, we think that the path of a disabled artist must be regarded as a series of inclusive practices from childhood on. And you cannot choose between the mainstream and margins if there hasn't been equal opportunities on the way.
And to create the equal opportunities, there most certainly need to be the gatekeepers to look at. They need to be challenged and invited to widen their perspectives. And we've seen some progress in this in Finland, I think. But we're far from any kind of gatekeepers. If we talk about like who are the curators or the buyers or those who decide who can join the advanced studies or so on, who decides about the grants, who is making decisions, you name it. But we've seen some changes, but it's far that the disabled people themselves would be really taking part as being decision makers, like you've been saying about UK too. Yeah.
Yeah, and well, as the success story in the beginning shows, it's possible to break through into the mainstream, and it may bring along positive influences on many levels. So we think it's worth the fight.
Yeah.
And on the last slide, we have our logo again and our website, cultureforall.fi. And there you can find some information materials, well, mostly in Finnish, but also in English. And you can join the email list as well. It always has an English summary. And on Facebook, you can find us by our Finnish name, so facebook.com/kulttuuria kaikille. Thank you.
Thank you, Sari and Uti, and thank you both for coming and joining us from Helsinki. We appreciate you making this journey. I mentioned earlier that there are some really exciting developments happening in classical music, and here to tell us more about them and to share his experience as a composer, broadcaster, and administrator, please welcome Lloyd Coleman.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew, Joe, and thanks for the invitation to be on this really fascinating panel this morning. For the purposes of audio description, I am a tall, white male in his mid-20s with blonde hair and blue eyes. I wear glasses and I have hearing aids as well in both ears. And I'm wearing a checked blue and green top and sort of matching blue trousers to go with it. And as Andrew mentioned earlier, I am the Associate Music Director of the Power Orchestra and Friends, based in Bristol. And our title, Power Orchestra and Friends, might give you a clue to our approach to changing the mainstream from within, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. I've been the Associate Music Director of the Power Orchestra and Friends for about a year now, but I've actually been involved in the group as a musician since the end of 2011, and I suspect many of you here will remember or be aware that the Power Orchestra actually launched on, I guess, what you could describe as one of the most sort of mainstream stages you can imagine. It was the closing ceremony of the Paralympic Games in London in 2012, and we performed with Coldplay and did a few other pieces within that ceremony as well. So that was the launch of the group, and when I was approached by Charles Hazelwood to join the group as a clarinet player, I was very interested. I was studying at the Royal Academy of Music at the time as a composer, and I was interested because I already knew and admired and respected Charles as a conductor and composer and musician of world renown, and I was only interested in joining this group that hadn't been formed yet, but I was only interested in joining it because of his involvement. Now, Charles doesn't have a disability himself, but it's been well documented that he set up the group for two reasons, really. His daughter was born with cerebral palsy, and this made him think about the lack of representation, the chronic lack of representation of disabled musicians and performers in orchestras that he conducted around the world at that point, over 25 years or so of his conducting career. So I was very interested in joining the group because of his reputation, and 7 years on, obviously, with the orchestra and the organisation as a whole now thriving, under his leadership still as artistic director, and also Jonathan Harper, our chief executive, who can't be here today, but I think he's watching online. I feel that my decision to join the group has been sort of somewhat vindicated already, and I feel more than ever now that I am being treated as a musician, first and foremost, and then my needs as a disabled person, as a hearing impaired person, and as a visually impaired person are also met, but they're not of sort of paramount importance. The musician aspect of me comes first, and I think that's how I treat all of my colleagues in the Power Orchestra as well. So going back to the term, the Power Orchestra and Friends, it's technically the umbrella title for the hub. It's now based in Bristol. We've been going 2 years. We are now part of the Arts Council England National Portfolio, and it's made up of the British Power Orchestra. It has that at its heart, that is a flexible group of about 25 or so musicians, all of whom are professional and all of whom have a disability of one kind or another. But we also have other groups under that umbrella title. So we have the Army of Generals, which is a collective of orchestral musicians, many of them in their sort of, again, mid-20s, early 30s, but right across the spectrum, all professional musicians who have trained at the various music colleges up and down the land, able-bodied, but we often bring the members of the Power Orchestra into, or integrate members of the Power Orchestra into that group, the Army of Generals, for our projects. But the critical point, and this is one of the points that I'd really like to sort of underline, is that we only do that when we feel it's appropriate for that project or for that musician. So we prefer not to play a numbers game with our projects. We don't go, right, we must have a certain percentage of our groups as disabled musicians, because we might not have the talent or the right musicians for that project. So we treat every project as a kind of new slate. And as you'll see in a moment in the show reel at the end of this presentation, we have a huge range of projects, and so it just wouldn't be appropriate to include all of our musicians who have a disability in all of our projects. We choose very, very carefully. And another point I think I'd like to kind of bring to the room this morning is, I think the term's already been mentioned a few times this morning, disabled-led. And Andrew's spoken about, again, the chronic lack of representation in leadership in mainstream arts organisations around the UK and further afield. But at the Power Orchestra, we're not, I think there's a danger that you can be dogmatic about being disabled-led. Of course, representation of disabled musicians is critical, and I'm very grateful to have my position as Associate Music Director, and obviously I'm sort of at the early stages of my career really as a musician and as a sort of arts administrator. And so I'm receiving mentoring from Jonathan, the Chief Executive, and of course from Charles himself as well. And I am learning so much through being the Associate Music Director of the Power Orchestra, as well as, I hope, helping the development of the group and finding new musicians and arranging and composing and taking part in the projects as well. So really for us, it's about the art. It's about the right person leading the rehearsal room at any one point. So it might be Charles Hazelwood at one point. It might be Caroline Bowditch, the choreographer at others. We're working on a project which I hope many of you will see tomorrow when we open Unlimited Festival. Caroline Bowditch, wonderful choreographer, of course. She's led many of our rehearsals for that in collaboration with Charles. I've mentioned the Army of Generals. I should also mention, under that same umbrella term, Power Orchestra and Friends, we have Charles Hazelwood's All-Star Collective, which is a band of well-known sort of pop and rock musicians, so people like Adrian Utley from Portishead and Will Gregory from Goldfrapp. And Will has written the music for The Nature of Why. Fantastic cinematic score, which is just gorgeous, and he's worked with all of the musicians in the Power Orchestra to devise that piece. And so again, it brings me back to that point about not being too dogmatic about only working with disabled leaders or musicians. It's about bringing the two together, and I think we can effect change in the mainstream by kind of coalescing and truly integrating these two groups of people. I just want to quickly mention as well, if I have time, some of our sort of co-collaborators, some of the key people that we've worked with up and down the country. So Bristol Music Trust, who run the Colston Hall in Bristol, it's currently closed for refurbishment. They are making it fully accessible when it reopens in 2020, and they've made the Power Orchestra and Friends their first associate artist. So we have a very close relationship with them, and clearly those relationships are really important for an organisation that is still growing, still burgeoning, still experimenting. And Birmingham Symphony Hall as well. We played at Birmingham Symphony Hall last year. We're very grateful to Richard Hawley, who was the director of programmes there, I think at the time, still is, I can't remember. But Richard kind of took a punt on us, really. He said, well, yes, we will put you on the main stage of the Symphony Hall with the City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra on a Saturday night as part of our international classical music season. So we won't kind of hide you away in the corner and give you a free performance in the foyer, which is sometimes, I think, what programmers and festival programmers kind of go for and are tempted to do because it's an easy way out. Richard took the opposite approach and really put us at the heart of that concert schedule and put resources and time and energy into making that concert a success. I think I'm running out of time, so I'll just introduce the show reel that I've got. It's a very short clip of some of the work we've been doing over the past 2-3 years of the Power Orchestra and Friends. You will see many of our projects in the video. For the purposes of audio description, I'm not going to try and describe everything that's in the video because it's very quickly cut, but Craftwork Rework, you'll see a 39-piece orchestra, all dressed in white. That's our sort of preferred uniform at the Power Orchestra and Friends, angelic white. Playing a sort of rock-style gig at the Colston Hall as part of Simple Things Festival to thousands of people on their feet and cheering along, very colourful lighting display alongside that. Glastonbury, we played at Glastonbury in 2017 on the park stage. You'll see some clips of the laser show that accompanied that amazing evening against the sort of dark skies above it, beaming out into the night. We played Army of Generals and members of the British Power Orchestra, the Hero Symphony by Philip Glass, in tribute to David Bowie, who passed away just a few months prior. So that was our kind of midnight vigil tribute to him at Glastonbury. Again, on the main stage, park stage at Glastonbury, to tens of thousands of people and hundreds of thousands more people watching at home. What better way to put ourselves at the heart of the mainstream and to take our message out to the public than with a project like that. And then the inclusion of members of the British Power Orchestra becomes incidental, but they're there because they are good enough to be there, not because they are, you know, tokens of disability. I will read out the text that appears on the screen in this video. The music you can hear is composed by Charlotte Harding, another wonderful composer we've worked with, and it's from our Craftwork rework project. So if we could just play the video, please. A person should be defined by their ability, not their disability. And the Power Orchestra and Friends logo. When we started the Power Orchestra and Friends, we thought it was about levelling the platform. Actually, it's about creating an orchestra for the 21st century. As a demonstration of the enabling power of music technology, both in terms of inclusivity and the range of sound an orchestra can make. They are nothing short of a marvel. And there's a list of supporters and partners that we've worked with over the years at the end of that video. And you can find out more information about our work, powerorchestra.com. Follow us on Twitter at Power Orchestra, and you can follow me on Twitter at Lloyd R. Coleman. I think my time is up.
Yeah, it is. Thank you very much, Lloyd.
No worries.
Thank you. Thank you very much to all our speakers and for all of you for patiently listening to us. That brings our session to a close. The one question I'm really aware of that we didn't answer was whether Arts Council England's Creative Case for Diversity is working or whether it goes far enough. Perhaps we can pick that up in our subsequent session. There's now going to be a 15-minute comfort break, and we reconvene in the following rooms at 12:15. Here in the Western Theatre, you can join Sari and Uti, who will share more of their research, and will be joined by Mark, and the session will be chaired by Fiona Slater. Jess will take you to Biscuitland in the foil rehearsal room. Joe will chair the session in the JLR meeting room, or you can join me in the Clore room. But thank you very much. Enjoy your break.
Sorry, just before that, are already in those spaces. So you don't need to go downstairs, have refreshments, and then go to those spaces. You can go straight to those spaces and have your refreshments while you're getting ready for those groups. The refreshments for this space are just outside. Thank you.